October is the month for where we are supposed to celebrate a natural approach to breast health, because if we are not celebrating a natural approach to breast health, I don't know much what health is to celebrate, because actually we have not made progress with cancer, and specifically breast cancer. If we look at what at what the World Health Organization is saying about breast cancer, we see that it's the most common cancer among women worldwide. And it's not, rich women against poor women and developed countries and against not developed countries. It is everywhere a big, big problem. And thousands of women are affected with this disease. And it is fair to wonder, what happened to the billions of dollars that have been spent for the past 50 years. Next year, it's going to be 50 years that Nixon declared the war on cancer, and billions of money has been thrown at cancer and breast cancer. And here we are, 50 years later, with 1 in 8 women, still in the United States, are going to develop breast cancer in their lifetime. So if we continue to do what we have done for the past 50 years, and we expect a different result, it's a definition of insanity. So I think it is overdue the time to look at something else. And tonight, what I am suggesting is that we look at an approach that was developed by my late father, Dr. Mirko Beljanski. He was a researcher, a PhD in molecular biology at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, and he is known to be now one of the first environmentalists of the time. He looked at the time back in the 80s at cancer, and he made an observation that went against the general wisdom of the time. At the time, everybody was saying that cancer could only result from a mutation, which is a change at one of the nucleotides that are the little grains here that constitute the strands of the DNA. But Mirko Beljanski was the first one to say, no. Cancer can result from a mutation, but only about 5% of cancers result from genetic mutations. 95% of cancer result from a slow destabilization of the DNA that results from environmental toxins. And he made the observation that there is a fundamental difference between healthy DNA, here shown here, where you see the hydrogen bonds are keeping the 2 strands of the DNA together, and cancer DNA, where you can see they are so stretched, the 2 strands are so stretched that at some point the hydrogen bonds are broken. And Beljanski's theory is that cancer DNA differs from normal DNA in its secondary structure, meaning the way the strands are kept together, rather than only its primary structure, which is the little nucleotides that constitute the grains of the strands of the DNA. So let's look at what, yes, that's a DNA that is broken. So let's look at what happened when the DNA is in contact with a carcinogen. Line A here, you have a nice healthy DNA, and you can see the 2 strands are nicely kept together. Put it in contact with a carcinogen, you have line B. You see some beginning of destabilization of the DNA. Theoretically, if you stop the contact with a carcinogen, it's able to heal itself and go back to line A. But in real life, we are completely submerged with carcinogens of all kinds all day long. And that's when, sometimes what happened is that because of this ongoing contact with the carcinogens, there are those big loops that are created, and those two strands, the hydrogen bonds are too stretched. The two strands of the DNA are widely open, and when the strands are separated, enzymes for DNA replication have increased access to the duplication sites located inside the double helix, and duplication can become abnormally accelerated. And that's really the hallmark of cancer cells. Mirko Beljanski had the idea to look at nature to find a solution, that would do exactly the opposite of carcinogens. And he was able to find not one, but two botanicals able to do exactly that. One is Pao Pereira, coming from the Amazon rainforest, and the other one is Revolfia vomitoria, coming from West Africa. And he found what was the active molecule for each compound, and he was able to create an extract very rich in active molecule. And then he reasoned that if those extracts are able to work at the level of the DNA, they are not going to be gender or organ specific. They are going to go anywhere where we have some destabilization of the DNA. So what he did, at the Pasteur Institute, where he was a researcher, he tested his extracts on different kinds of cancer cell lines. And here you have the human liver, and you can see that here the Pao Pereira in blue and the Revolfia vomitoria in green are both able to nicely inhibit the growth of those cancer cells. Here we have thyroid, and you can see again a very nice inhibition of both by both extracts of this cancer cell line. And here we have breast cancer cell. And you see again both extracts doing a pretty good job at inhibiting the growth of this line of cancer cells. Actually, he tested on 16 kinds of cancer cells, and it was working and working and working. He left 133 peer-reviewed papers, and he got the attention of a number of French doctors who started to use those products that were working on all those kinds of cancer cells. He became more and more famous for that, and one day, even François Mitterrand, the former French president, had to use the products, and that's where havoc came, because that led a new way that people were looking at natural compounds. They were working better than official drugs. That was not something that the government was going to allow. So they sent the army one day to destroy my father and his research. Hundreds of people took the streets of Paris and other cities of France asking for les produits Beljanski efficaces et non toxiques, the Beljanski products, efficient and non-toxic. But it did not matter. Everything was destroyed in France, and including my father himself. And that's how everything started again in the States, here, America, the land of the second chance. What we wanted to do here in the States was to confirm that those compounds were able to work on a large spectrum of cancer cells. And we worked with a number of universities like Kansas University, Columbia University, and different kinds of cancer cells. More specifically for breast, we were able to work with a laboratory called RGCC. They have developed a revolutionary test that is changing our perception of cancer. They have created a patented membrane which is able to capture the malignant cells from your blood. So you go to the doctor draws blood, and it is sent to the lab, and the lab puts the blood through the membrane and keeps those cancerous cells. And then it's able to test those cancerous cells against a number of products, chemotherapies, but also natural products, to see how they are going to react to those cancer cells. And sure enough, here we have breast cancer patient, and she was shown here that she was receptive to our mix of Pao Pereira and Revolfia vomitoria called Oncobel Pro, and that this mix was inducing apoptosis, which is the death of cancer cells in this patient. So that's confirmation before she started the treatment that this mix of Pao Pereira and Revolfia vomitoria was going to be efficient at destroying her breast cancer cells. It's not just breast. With this methodology, we got confirmation that it was working on ovarian cancer, pancreatic, stomach, lung, uterus, right here is breast, parotid gland, colon, and small intestine. So again, this was showing that it was a large spectrum of anti-cancer activity, which was confirming the work done previously in vitro in France on different kinds of cancer cells. Of course, together with the results obtained by RGCC, we also had a number of testimonials of women using the Pao Pereira or the Revolfia extracts. Here we have a lady who had a lump and that it could not be operated. So she was given Arimidex, which is a chemotherapy at the hospital, but it was not very effective, she says. She had metastasis. So she decided on the advice of an homeopath to start Revolfia vomitoria, and her blood markers improved, and she reports that she's very satisfied. She would not use the word cure, but she is very happy with the formulation, and she says she has been able to raise her daughter. Another one here, another lady, she refused to take tamoxifen, and she decided to take Pao Pereira, and she says she's very, very happy, doing very well. So that's another, we have plenty of those testimonials. If you want to read more, please go to beljanski.org. You will find a number of testimonials. Beyond testimonials, what kind of research that we were able to do at the Beljanski Foundation on breast cancer was more specifically with tea. I learned that my father, Mirko Beljanski, back in the 80s, went to China to conduct some research. He was invited by a Chinese lab, and he was offered at the time to leave a ceremonial gift with plenty of the best samples of teas that China had to offer. And once back at the Pasteur Institute, he tested those teas for their anti-cancer properties, and he selected 4 teas which had remarkable, in his view, remarkable anti-cancer properties. So what we did is we mixed those teas, we call that mixed oncotea, and we sent that mixed to Kansas University Medical Center along with other green teas, Bigelow, Kuzmi, Lipton. We did not tell them which was which, and we just asked them to test on breast cancer. And you can see that oncotea here is doing a much better job than Bigelow, Kuzmi, or Lipton at inhibiting, again, the growth of those breast cancer cells. And here you have metastatic breast cancer cells, and oncotea is doing even better. and metastatic. The more it is aggressive, the more Oncoti is working. Why? Because it is, again, recognizing the DNA which is destabilized and jumping on this destabilized DNA to prevent its duplication. So the more aggressive, the more the cancer, the more destabilized the DNA. We went on to test on bladder cancer, because that's very important, because that's where we accumulate the T when we drink a lot of it. And you can see, compared to Lipton, Oncoti is effective at inhibiting the growth of bladder cancer cells. Here, liver, again, Oncoti, in a matter of hours, in vitro at least, is destroying those cancer cells. We went on with melanoma, 4 lines of melanoma, and you can see, again, every time, a very nice inhibition of those cancer cells, especially compared to Lipton with Oncoti. This line of research was published by Kansas University Medical Center. This publication, once again, is available on beljanski.org. Now, I would like to say a few words about something completely different, but you cannot address breast cancer without having a few words about emotions and our emotion boundaries. It turns out that emotional boundaries are most important to our health. That's a way to preserve our our system, ourself. We have a mechanism of coping which would based on our values, and only if we have those values, we are going to be able to have those strong boundaries against bullies. And it is very important to defend ourselves against bullies and stressors. There is actually a number of research which have been done linking breast cancer and increased stress. Here, the stressful events and risk of breast cancer, a cohort study, it was done here in Finland a few years ago, and their conclusion is that divorce, separation, death of a husband, death of a close relative or friend are all associated with increased risk of breast cancer. So you think that stress is going to induce automatically breast cancer, but that's not that simple. Actually, you have here another study from Norway showing that there is no clear evidence that death of a husband or marital divorce was associated with an increased risk of breast cancer. So we have here kind of contradiction, or we don't. Actually, it is not the stress itself, it's how we respond to the stress, which is really the factor. And that's where, you know, emotional boundaries and our immune system, which looks very much like our emotional boundaries, come to play. And just like we have our values to help us cope, we have here our immune system and our natural killer cells, which are part of the white blood cells, to help us cope and fight back against the invaders of all sorts.